Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show. I'm going to shift things. I'm usually sour and going on about things and grumbling about things. A lot of people on the left are sour about things, grumbling and going on about things. But we got some positive content coming today with the guest I got coming on. His name's Colin Craig. He's with secondstreet.org. You might remember from the Taxpayers Federation. He's been busy with a lot of things. And Second Street's putting out some great policy briefs and papers. And we've been trained, to think that carbon is a pollutant. Carbon dioxide is nasty. I mean, like people like to point out, we exhale it. It's not uncommon. Trees breathe it in. Carbon dioxide isn't all bad, but there are concerns about the levels of carbon dioxide we're producing and how it might be impacting the environment. That's a whole separate discussion. But what we do have going on are some really innovative, creative companies and people with ideas on what you can do with the carbon then if we don't want it going off into the atmosphere. I mean, carbon capture is something we've talked a lot about in the West and in oil and gas production facilities and things such as that, using it for even oil recovery by pumping it underground. But then that's the end of the product. It's gone, which still may be very good for the environment, but it's not making anything out of it. Well, what they've come up with is a list of 25 products that are made through captured carbon, things we can make, that have value, from bicycles to even yoga mats, as we'll go into, and a number of the things that they listed on that. There's even some pretty cool and neat things that can be made out of carbon. The future doesn't have to be bleak. Carbon doesn't have to be tossed away as a waste product or hidden away as a pollutant. We can actually make something of it. And as we carry on with that, it will solve a lot of those problems without crushing our economy, as some people seem to feel is the best way to manage to do that. And before we go to Colin, I just want to remind everybody, be sure to take out a membership with the Western Standard if you haven't already. It's $10 a month. It's well worth your time. Go to the westernstandardonline.com, check out the membership button, take a free trial. You'll get some free paywall free content. You can get straight in there. Check it out. You'll find it's a good investment, and it keeps us going. We don't take tax dollars. Nobody's offering tax dollars, and we can keep coming up with this good content for you to enjoy. So we appreciate the members who've already subscribed, and if you haven't already, please help us out and take out a subscription. So without further ado, let's get on to Colin Craig from secondstreet.org. Hey there, Colin. Welcome back to the show. It's always good getting you on. I love the stuff you guys do out there. You put out some great papers and studies. And this one really caught my eye, this policy brief with 25 carbon tech examples. I mean, we keep pointing at carbon as this pollutant and this terrible toxin or whatever it might be, and seeing a list of positive things and looking at it as a commodity rather than a waste product was refreshing. Can you expand a little on what you guys put out?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's been it's definitely one of the cooler policy briefs I've ever worked on. My colleague James Skinner, he was the one that was the lead writer, and I helped with finding examples in that. But what we wanted to do was take a look at climate change and emissions from a different perspective, because so often in public discourse in Canada about climate change, it's doom and gloom. You hear politicians routinely calling CO2 pollution and so forth. And I think what we've seen is a bit of a paradigm shift occur, where entrepreneurs are saying, well, wait a second, CO2 is actually used to make lots of different products. So instead of letting carbon dioxide release up into the atmosphere, why don't we capture it and make cool things with it? So we thought, well, let's take a look. Let's try and find some of these cool examples that entrepreneurs are working on, but also examples of where companies are doing cool things to reduce emissions in the first place. So we came up with a list of 25. We wanted to put it out there and talk about this issue from a more positive and optimistic perspective, rather than the doom and gloom scenarios that so often dominate media coverage of the issue.
Yeah, well, in carbon sequestration, I mean, people can understand that. You're just taking it, you're stuffing it underground or somewhere to contain it. But then it is a lost resource in that sense. And now you're going to take something and perhaps make a tangible, valuable product out of it. So I'll start with one that really jumped out, and most people can relate with the benefits of it, or perhaps the non-benefits, but is vodka. So how on earth does vodka come into a list of carbon products?
Yeah, this is probably my favorite too. And I'm not a big vodka drinker, but I think it's just awesome that they've been able to make vodka using captured carbon dioxide. I've actually got a bottle of it. It's called put it right there. Maybe your viewers can see it or not. It's called the Air Company. That's the name of the company. They're in New York. And what they did was found a way to make vodka using just two ingredients, carbon dioxide and water. And I think a lot of people are wondering, well, how on earth do you do this? And it's actually quite simple. When you write out the formula, the chemical formula for ethanol, which is the main ingredient in vodka, you'll see that it's got three elements in it, and that's it. It's got carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And of course, we could find those three same elements in carbon dioxide and water. So what they've been able to do through the magic of the technology that they've developed is basically create ethanol. And then with ethanol, you add water to it to water it down, and that's how you get vodka. So they've been able to produce the vodka. It's very, very pure. I've tried a little bit. It's very, very smooth. Vodka. It's quite nice, actually. It doesn't give you that same burn that you might get from some of the cheaper stuff that I grew up on, at least in my
the old high school bottle of Smirnoff. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's pretty amazing. They're actually trying to get into the LCBO in Ontario to start selling in Canada, but it's awesome. The company is also creating hand sanitizer using captured carbon dioxide. They have a perfume that they just released, but there's also a ton of really cool examples in Canada, including many right here in Calgary. So one example I love is a company. They've started up. They're called Carbonova. And what they do is they're making carbon nanofibers. And if you've ever picked up a really lightweight badminton racket or maybe a bicycle, it's got a lightweight frame, it's not uncommon to see that it's a carbon fiber material that helps make that. And so this company is basically creating that same material, but through a different process. And their process involves captured carbon dioxide. And so I think that's really cool. Once they're up and fully running and producing their material, they think they can make it relatively inexpensively and capture a lot of carbon dioxide along the way. So it's really cool what they've been able to come up with. I'll give you another fun example here in Calgary. Is a company was the individual was in the, I believe, heating and ventilation and plumbing, that line of work. And what he realized was that if you could capture carbon dioxide from a building's heating system, instead of it going up into the atmosphere, if you capture it, there's a way that he could make soap out of it. So that's what that company's been doing. They're called Clean O2. And that's pretty awesome. There's been lots of different examples that we came across that were just pretty amazing to see that entrepreneurs can do what they're doing. Another example from New York actually is a company called Aether Diamonds. They're making diamonds from captured carbon dioxide. So I think the sky is really the limit in terms of what entrepreneurs are able to do.
Yeah, and this list really reflects just that principle, like technology, innovation. We don't have to just shut things out, shut them down, throw them aside. Like we come up with new ways of doing things, and we can mitigate problems that be created. And one that I liked in this list too, that was kind of an irony, was yoga mats. So they don't have to be, sourced from hemp and other such things. We could have a captured carbon yoga mat out there.
You can, yeah. And in that case, I believe what they do is they take carbon dioxide, they fuse it together with some other materials. It's one of the ingredients, but it's great. I mean, it's, to be able to get a yoga mat and it's partially made with captured CO2, that's certainly I think a step in the right direction. And when I think back about, to my first comment about how discourse in this country is so negative, you see these stories about kids dealing with ecological anxiety and they're concerned about climate change and that, like, to the point where they're worrying about it at night, they can't sleep. I mean, that's crazy that we're doing that to the next generation. I think what we need are for leaders to say, hey, wait a second, let's inspire these kids so that they could be the next entrepreneurs that are finding a way to use CO2 to make cool stuff, instead of letting them, have sleepless nights and dealing with anxiety. It's pretty terrible what's happening.
Yeah, on that front, on your list, you have blue M&Ms. I mean, there's not many kids who wouldn't like blue M&Ms. It's a nice positive product of carbon, if anything I've heard of.
Yeah, and I love that example. It's from Ontario. It's a company in Markham called Pond Technologies, and what they do is awesome. Basically, from a smokestack, instead of letting the CO2 go up into the atmosphere, what they do is they capture the CO2, they pump it into a tank. The tank has a bunch of algae in it, and basically what happens is the algae eat the CO2 and then they grow and expand. and eventually you can process that algae into all kinds of really useful products, nutraceuticals. They're working on biofuels, and then a material called phycocyanin. At least I think I'm pronouncing it right. And that's a fancy way of saying the material that's used to make blue food coloring. So that can be used in things like M&Ms. So it's pretty awesome what's going on. I think we need a lot more discourse on these examples. They're positive. We should be inspiring people. I think if politicians talked about these examples more, you could get more exposure for these companies. And with more exposure, it might be easier for them to attract some venture capital. So if they can have more money, then they can expand their operations, maybe work on even more projects. That's, I think, the way that we're going to address emissions in this country, rather than sort of this doom and gloom discourse that dominates so much of how we discuss it.
Yeah, so I mean, at this point, a lot of this is still in its infancy, and we're not obviously going to be able to drink ourselves into a carbon-free world, but I mean, a lot of people are willing to put in their best effort on it, I'm sure. But this is how a lot of technology gets discovered that can be scalable and actually start making a very real impact on our carbon emissions from a number of industries, I imagine.
Oh, I think you're completely right. This is many of these companies, I think, are still in the early stages, but they're getting better, just as most companies do. Most companies don't start off like, you know, the Ford manufacturing plant in Ontario, where it's just absolutely enormous. You start off small. You develop your technology, you refine it, you continually make it better. And as you sell more products, you have more money coming in that you can invest in new technology and new ideas. And you just keep getting better and better and better. And like I said, I think one of the cool things about doing research for this report and seeing some of the examples my colleague found was that there's so many things happening right here in Canada. And that's positive. We need to talk about it more. We need to think about how we can support this sector. You know, I'll give you another example. So often if you go on the federal government's website, you see how they give out research grants. And at the same time, Ottawa keeps telling us that we're in a climate crisis. Well, I know that in my own personal life, when something is sort of at a crisis level, emergency level, that's what you focus on. So why are we using federal research dollars to fund half of the crazy stuff that they're spending money on, when those dollars could be used towards helping out in post-secondary institutions with channeling more students into research related to carbon tech, instead of, you know, looking into, I don't know, 8th century Japanese haikus or some of the crazy stuff that you see Ottawa spending money on. If it's an emergency and it's a crisis and it's an important issue, then it's time, I think, to start directing some of those research dollars towards this issue instead of some of the distractions.
Yeah, and as you said, it's great just to see something positive. We're getting nothing but gloom and doom these days, whether it's the pandemic or the economy or you name it. So, I mean, we've got to retain some faith. We've got creative people out there. We've got innovative people. We have problems do get solved. I mean, they aren't insurmountable. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time to show that list. Like, there's a lot of things coming out of this, you know, positive things that can be made out of carbon if people have been trained to think it's a negative. You guys have some other stuff coming up. Where can we find more information about what Second Street's up to, and what can we look forward to in the future?
So if people go to our website, secondstreet.org, they can see all of our policy briefs, the one that we've been talking about. We've done lots of research on healthcare, natural resource development. We've got a lot of material coming out on that in the near future. And we've also got a couple short little videos on this very topic, so they can share them with their friends and provide some optimism out there. Instead of, you know, as we keep talking about the doom and gloom, there's some good stuff happening. We should talk about it. We should tell our friends. And that's how we're going to address this issue.
Right on. Well, thanks again for coming on with me, and I'm looking forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks a lot, Cory. It's always a pleasure.
Okay, I think that'll do her.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And if you flag it for me if I don't see it once it's live, then I'll share it on our channels too.
Yeah, you bet. No, I'll send you a heads up, and if you guys get anything, you know, coming out or breaking, hey, give me a line. We're producing more now, and get the word out. Like I said, genuine. Yeah, it is nice just seeing something positive. You know, you guys came up with, well, these other people came up with it, and you put it all together. Like, guys, it doesn't all have to be shit.
Yeah, I think it's necessary, especially for our side. You know, we're always trying to talk about, well, what do you do with this issue? It's a political issue, has to be addressed whether people like it or not. I think this is a positive way of talking about it, rather than, you know, some of the other things that people have brought up. But anyway,
Right
we'll stay in touch on this, and I appreciate the chance to chat with you and your audience.
Great, sounds good. Thanks, Colin.
Okay, take care, sir.